Let me tell you something about dignity. It doesn't vanish all at once. It erodes slowly, quietly, moment by moment, until one day you find yourself standing in front of your only son's house, clutching two suitcases filled with the scraps of a life you once called your own, and you realize there's no room left for you in his world. The cab rolled to a stop in front of a tidy two-story house with a green lawn so pristine it looked like a catalog ad. I glanced at my watch. Just shy of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The drive from Pittsburgh had taken longer than expected. The cab driver, a young man with an earring and a tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, stepped out and pulled my two suitcases onto the sidewalk. "Have a good day, ma'am," he said casually. It took longer than I'd like to fumble through my bag for my wallet. My fingers just don't move the way they used to. "Thank you," I murmured, handing him the bills. "Keep the change." And then he was gone. The car vanished down the street, and I was left standing alone in front of Randall's house, the son I hadn't seen in 3 years. Not since Harold's funeral. My husband had died of a heart attack at 78. Randall flew in for 2 days, stayed long enough to deliver a stiff eulogy, and disappeared before I even had time to grieve properly. "I've got a project on fire, Mom. You understand," he had said. And I did. Oh, I always understood. I understood when he missed Christmas because of work, when he forgot our anniversary because he was on a business trip, when he didn't call after my knee surgery because the phone was dead. That's what mothers do. We find ways to understand, to excuse, to soften the hurt. His house looked more luxurious than I had imagined. Brick facade, manicured shrubs, a wide two-car garage. I knew Randall worked as an engineer for a construction company. His wife, Heather, was a manager at an insurance firm. They didn't have children, 12 years of marriage and still no kids. I stood there, taking a deep breath, and nudged my suitcase forward. It was heavier than I remembered. Then again, it held everything I had left. After Harold died, I couldn't maintain our home in Pittsburgh. 40 years in that house. But my modest pension as a retired supermarket cashier couldn't keep up with the property taxes, utility bills, and endless repairs. The roof alone would have swallowed 3 months of my income. So I sold it. When I told Randall, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said he'd talk to Heather. 3 days later, he called back. "You can stay with us, temporarily," he said, pausing to emphasize the word. "Until you find something suitable." I climbed the porch steps and rang the bell. From inside, I heard brisk footsteps, and then the door opened to reveal Heather. Slender, sharply dressed, short blonde hair pinned neatly back. Her smile was wide and entirely insincere. "Margaret, you've made it at last," she said with forced cheer. Come in, come in. Randall's still at work, but he'll be home soon." She leaned in to offer a hug that barely grazed my shoulders. The scent of expensive perfume clung to her, undercut by something else. Impatience, perhaps. "Let me help you with the suitcases," she said, grabbing the smaller one. "We'll leave the other until Randall gets home." The interior of the house was beautiful. Warm oak parquet floors, a carved mirror, a delicate console table adorned with fresh flowers. The kind of place where everything had a purpose, where nothing was left to age or fade. I felt embarrassingly out of place in my outdated suit and scuffed shoes. "You have a lovely home," I offered. "Thank you," she replied curtly. "We've recently remodeled." She led me past the gleaming kitchen and through the back door. I expected stairs, bedrooms upstairs, of course. But instead, we stepped outside. "We don't have a spare room in the house," Heather said quickly. "Randall uses the second bedroom as his home office, and the third, well, it's being renovated." Something clenched in my stomach, but I forced a polite nod. We walked across the pristine lawn to a small structure in the far corner of the yard. A barn, painted to match the house. "We remodeled it last summer," she explained, unlocking the door. "It was supposed to be a guest studio, but it's not quite finished." Inside was clean but tight. A single bed, a narrow table with a chair, a slim closet, and a tiny bathroom with a sliding door that didn't quite close. "There's heat," she said, pointing to an old radiator, "and Wi-Fi, though the signal's weak." I stood in silence, absorbing the reality of it. From a full house to this shed. After decades with Harold in our Pittsburgh home, this felt like being kenneled, tucked away and forgotten. "It's only temporary, of course," Heather added with a strained smile. "Until we can think of something better. Make yourself comfortable. I'll start dinner. Randall should be home by 6. She left me there with my suitcase and silence. I sat on the bed, stiff and creaky, and caught sight of a cobweb dangling from the corner of the ceiling. The window looked out onto a blank fence. A lump swelled in my throat, but I swallowed hard. I'm 75 years old. Too old for tears. I opened the suitcase and began unpacking. There wasn't much left. I'd sold most of it or given it away when we sold the house. I hung 2 dresses and 1 decent suit in the closet. On the table, I placed the photo of Harold, tall, kind-eyed, always steady. He had been an accountant. Home by 6, dinner at 6:30, every day. Never flashy, never rich, but dependable. And Randall, our only child, born late. I was nearly 40. Maybe that's why I pushed him so hard. I feared I wouldn't have enough time to raise him right. I was strict. Maybe too strict. Harold said I hovered too much. Maybe he was right. I remembered yelling at 12-year-old Randall for a C in math, making him redo his homework until it was pristine, forbidding him from prom for breaking curfew. "I just want a good man to come out of you," I told him once. But maybe all I did was drive him away. Now, here I was, living in a shed while my son barely made time to greet me. 2 hours later, I heard the slam of a door and looked out the window. Randall's tall frame crossed the yard, his pace casual, his face unreadable. I quickly adjusted my blouse and ran a hand through my hair. He opened the door without knocking. "Mom," he said flatly, "you made it." Not a question. No hug. I nodded. Randall looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened. There was gray in his hair. He wore a suit, but the tie hung loose around his neck. "How was the trip?" he asked, standing stiffly. "A bit tiring," I replied. Another pause. We looked at each other like distant relatives, not family. "Heather showed you the room?" "Yes. Thank you. It's cozy." He frowned slightly at my choice of word. "It's just temporary, Mom. The guest room needs repairs. Leaky pipe, some mold, had to rip up the floor." I nodded, even though I'd seen no signs of renovation. No paint cans. No tools. Nothing. "Well," he muttered, shifting his weight, "dinner's in half an hour. Heather made lasagna." "Sounds wonderful," I said with a smile I barely felt. "I'll see you in the house." He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. I exhaled. The first meeting had gone worse than I'd feared. All these years, and still a wall between us. I'd spent nights imagining our reunion, how maybe finally we'd connect again. That he'd look at me the way he did when he was little, when I was his whole world. But no. I was a responsibility now. A burden, tucked away in the barn. He would hug me, I thought. He'd wrap his arms around me and tell me he missed me, that things had been busy, but he thought of me every day. We'd sit together in the evenings, 2 cups of tea between us, laughing, reconnecting, talking about Harold, about his childhood, about all that time lost. Foolish dreams. The kind only an old woman would still bother to have. I changed into a more presentable dress, navy with white buttons, something plain but respectable, and started back toward the house. The air was cool as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the backyard. I noticed how different it was from the pristine lawn out front. This part of the property was untended, grass overgrown in patches, a neglected pile of last year's leaves slouched in the corner near the fence. Apparently, guests were only shown the beautiful half. As I approached the back door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. Inside, muffled voices echoed through the kitchen. Heather and Randall. I hesitated. You could have at least pretended to be happy to see her. Randall's voice was low but edged with frustration. I did, Heather snapped. But don't expect me to jump for joy. This was your idea. My idea. You're the one who said it was an opportunity. Shoo! Heather hissed. She might hear. I coughed deliberately and pushed the door open as if I'd just arrived, pretending not to have heard a word. Heather was at the stove, stirring something in a red Dutch oven. Randall sat at the bar, a half-finished glass of whiskey in his hand. Ah, Margaret, Heather turned with a tight smile. Just in time. Dinner's almost ready. Can I help you with anything? No, I said politely. I've got it under control, she assured me. Randall stood up, pushing his glass aside. Why don't I show you the house? We started in the living room, modern and well-kept, with a leather sectional couch, a glass-topped coffee table, and a wall-mounted TV that looked big enough to host a film premiere. It was elegant, expensive, but cold. Like a showroom. A few fancy magazines were neatly fanned out on the table, next to an untouched TV remote. No family photos. No books. No warmth. This is where we usually hang out in the evenings, Randall said. We watch movies on weekends. Very nice, I murmured. Next, he led me into the dining room. A long, dark wood table sat under a sparkling crystal chandelier. Matching chairs stood stiffly at attention, and a sideboard was lined with decorative plates and glasses that looked more ornamental than useful. We only eat here on special occasions, Randall explained. Mostly we eat in the kitchen. I noticed a painting on the wall, an abstract piece, all swirling color and chaos. Did Heather pick that? I asked. Yeah, Randall said, and his voice shifted slightly. She has good taste. I could hear the pride. And maybe a little defensiveness. We headed upstairs. The tour was brief. He pointed to the master bedroom and the bathroom, but didn't offer a look inside. Then came the home office, which had its door open. A modern desk sat against the window, a large monitor glowing faintly. Shelves lined the walls, and in the corner stood a gray fold-out couch. What's that for? I asked, gesturing to the couch. Randall hesitated. Sometimes I work late. Don't want to disturb Heather, so I crash here. I almost asked about the guest room, the one supposedly under renovation, but before I could, Heather's voice called from the kitchen, summoning us for dinner. We sat at the table in the kitchen. Heather served lasagna with careful precision, placing the steaming portions on square white plates. She poured red wine for Randall and me, while choosing mineral water for herself. To family reunions, she said, raising her glass. We clinked our glasses. The lasagna was well made, though too spicy for my taste. I smiled politely and washed each bite down with sips of wine that warmed my chest. How do you like our humble home, Margaret? Heather asked, smiling over her glass, her tone laced with challenge. It's beautiful, I said. It must have cost a lot. We work hard, Randall replied, his voice a little too flat. Of course, dear, I said quickly. It's clear you've both accomplished so much. The conversation drifted into empty pleasantries. We talked about the weather, the length of my trip, Randall's workload. No mention of Harold. No talk of childhood. There seemed to be an unspoken rule. Nothing personal, nothing emotional, nothing real. How's the house sale going? Randall asked casually as we were finishing dessert, a supermarket apple pie warmed in the oven. I already sold it, I replied. 2 weeks ago.
You did.
Randall sat up straighter. Did you get a good price? Heather shot him a sharp look. Enough, I said with forced lightness. I've paid off my debts and have a little left over to live on. So, you're not short of money, then? Randall pressed, ignoring Heather's tightening expression. I wouldn't say that. My pension is small, and the house money is all I have.
But it's enough.
How much? He asked, almost too quickly. Just so we know you're secure. I hesitated, then told him the number. Modest for most, but decent for a small home in a worn Pittsburgh neighborhood. Randall's eyes lit up. Heather gave a small nod. And where do you keep that money? He asked, trying to sound casual.
In the bank.
Some of it in securities, I replied. Harold always said not to put all your eggs in one basket. Your father was a wise man, Heather said smoothly, turning to Randall. By the way, honey, did you remember that car loan payment is due tomorrow? Randall's face darkened. No, I didn't forget. We'll figure it out. Are you having financial difficulties? I asked, recalling their earlier kitchen whispering.
No, not at all, Randall said quickly.
Just a temporary cash flow issue.
We all go through it.
Yes, I said softly. Harold always saved for a rainy day. He said you should have 6 months of expenses put aside. Heather nodded. Too bad we don't always follow that advice. After dinner, I offered to help with the dishes. Heather declined, pointing to their dishwasher. Randall went to the living room to watch a game. I excused myself, suddenly feeling the weight of the day pressing down. Good night, I said, pausing at the kitchen doorway. Good night, Margaret, Heather said without looking up from the sink. Breakfast is at 8, if you're up early. I stepped out into the yard. The evening was warm, but a chill ran through me. Back in the barn, I turned on the ceiling light, a dim bulb that hummed faintly. I washed up in the tiny sink and crawled into bed, stiff mattress and all. The window revealed a dark sky, starless and silent. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about Heather's fake smiles, Randall's sharp glances when I mentioned money, and the way they kept calling it the guest house, as if that made the indignity more palatable. No tears. Not tonight. I'd left them behind when I shut the door on my old life in Pittsburgh. Now I only felt numb. I was 75. I'd come here hoping to spend my last chapter in the heart of my family. Instead, I'd been shoved to its edge. What am I doing here? I wondered, staring into the dark. Why did I even come? Through the thin walls, I heard Randall's voice drift from the open window of the house. How much did she say? 200,000? That would solve all our problems, Heather. Every single one. Morning in the barn was colder than I'd expected. Arlington's May sun hadn't yet pierced the thin aluminum walls. I woke at 6, like I always did. 30 years of supermarket shifts had trained me well. Even in retirement, the habit stuck. I reached toward the table for Harold's photo. His quiet eyes seemed to ask, "How do you like it here, Margie?" "Not very much," I whispered, placing my palm beside the frame. I rose slowly, every joint stiff and aching from the hard bed. The bathroom barely allowed enough space to turn around. The water was icy. No hot water yet again. I dressed in a simple gray dress and cardigan, brushed my silver hair, and fastened it in a low knot. No makeup. At my age, it only draws more attention to the lines. At 7:45, I stepped out. The morning was crisp and full of birdsong. Dew sparkled on the lawn. For a moment, I missed my garden, every rose, every hydrangea, every hand-planted bulb. All gone now. The front door was locked. I walked around and knocked gently on the kitchen window. A minute passed before Heather opened it, still in her silk robe, her hair messy, face barely masking her annoyance.
Margaret, you're so early, she said, her voice edged with irritation.
We usually have breakfast at 9 on weekends. Oh, sorry, I said, embarrassed. I'm just used to early mornings.
No, you're here now, she sighed, gesturing me in.
Coffee. I'd love some. Heather fiddled with the coffee machine, complicated, blinking, loud. I sat at the bar, watching her smooth, frugal movements. Not one wasted gesture. Not one sign of warmth. Is Randall still asleep? I asked. Yeah. It's his day off. He sleeps in on Saturdays. She set a cup of espresso in front of me, then opened the fridge to pull out yogurt and berries. Would you like some toast? She asked, already reaching for the bread. Yes, thank you. We ate in strained silence. I tried to think of something light, something neutral, but nothing felt right. Then Heather spoke. How did you sleep in the guest house? Guest house. Interesting choice of words. It was fine, thanks, I said. A bit cold in the morning. Oh yeah, she said with a dismissive wave. The heater's old. Randall was going to replace it, but he didn't get around to it. It sounded like an afterthought. My comfort didn't seem to rank very high. It's okay, I said gently. I'm used to cooler weather. Heather nodded, barely listening. She glanced down at her phone, frowning. She muttered something under her breath. Is something wrong? I asked. No, just... She paused. The bank sent a notice. A payment issue. A home loan. No. Randall's car. He bought a BMW last year. Maybe not the smartest move. I stayed quiet. I'd always believed if you couldn't afford something, you didn't buy it.
But I knew better than to say that aloud now.
Do you have financial difficulties? I asked quietly. Heather looked up slowly, then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I asked directly. Heather hesitated, her lips parting slightly as if still weighing the benefits of honesty. Finally, she said, to be honest, yes. Her voice was flat, low, tinged with defeat. Randall invested in a friend's startup. Some kind of tech company. It was supposed to be a gold mine. Everyone said so. But it tanked. Completely. We lost almost $100,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. $100,000. Harold and I had never seen that kind of money in our entire lives, not even in combined savings. The number alone made my stomach tighten.
And then, Heather continued, as though laying out an inevitability, there were medical bills.
Randall had back surgery last year. Insurance covered some, but not all. A big chunk came out of pocket. Her eyes found mine, full of unspoken implication. But we'll get through it, she added quickly, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We always do. By 11, Randall finally made an appearance. Rumpled, unshaven, clearly not a morning person even on a good day. His face registered faint surprise when he saw me. Mom,
how long VE you been up?
Since 8, Heather replied, answering in my place. Your mom's an early bird. Randall yawned and shuffled over to the coffee machine, fiddling with the buttons. He looked older than I remembered, wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, a receding hairline, and a small but unmistakable paunch above his pajama pants. I watched him move, and for a strange moment, I realized I didn't know this man at all. My son, my flesh and blood, felt like a stranger who wore a familiar face. What are your plans today? He asked as he settled into a kitchen chair with his mug. It was Heather's question, but I answered. I thought I'd take a walk, look around the neighborhood, maybe find a store. There's one about 3 blocks from here, Randall said. But it's supposed to rain today. Why don't you stay home? Home. What an interesting word to use for a drafty shed behind their house. I'm not sugar, I said with a smile. I won't melt. I've worked through snowstorms and heat waves. Randall shrugged. Whatever you say. He turned to Heather. Did you talk to the bank? Yes, she said quietly. They gave us a 2-week extension. But then it's pay or, she trailed off, glancing pointedly at me. Randall followed her look. I ignored the silent exchange. I'll go get ready for my walk, I said, pushing my chair back. Mom, wait, Randall said suddenly, standing. Did Heather tell you about our situation? She mentioned a little, I replied cautiously. We're just in a bit of a bind, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. The startup, it really looked promising. My friend Gordon is smart. He had this brilliant idea. Nobody saw the crash coming. Sometimes investments don't pay off, I offered neutrally. Exactly. Randall latched onto my words. But now we're drowning. The bank might repossess the car. Then there's the credit card debt, and the mortgage isn't far behind. He looked at me meaningfully, and for a moment he seemed almost like a little boy again, scared, cornered, reaching for something solid. I saw it coming, but the moment still hurt. Actually, Mom, he said, clearing his throat, I was wondering if maybe you could help us. Just temporarily. We'll pay you back as soon as we're out of this hole. There it was. The first ask. I kept my voice steady. How much do you need? 30,000, Heather answered quickly, stepping in as if they'd rehearsed it. That would clear the worst debts. 30,000. Nearly a sixth of everything I had left to survive the rest of my life. I swallowed. That's a lot of money, I said slowly. We know, Randall added quickly. And we're so grateful that you're considering it. I hadn't said anything yet, but already they were thanking me. A classic manipulator's tactic, assume agreement before it's given. I'll need to think about it, I said, rising. That's all I have saved. For my old age. Of course, Mom. Randall smiled tightly. There's no pressure. Just, sooner is better. The bank won't wait forever. I nodded and left the kitchen, feeling their eyes follow me all the way back to the barn. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, my breath slow and shallow. So here it was, the first reach toward my money. I had no doubt it wouldn't be the last. The day drifted by, gray and heavy. I did go to the store, mostly out of a need for solitude. I picked up a few essentials, some tea, oatmeal, fruit, and cookies. I didn't want to burden them by eating their food, not now. When I returned, Randall was tinkering in the garage, Heather flipping through a glossy magazine on the porch. They both pretended not to see me. That evening, as I was making myself a modest dinner, just oatmeal with some fruit, there was a knock on the shed door. It was Randall. He ducked inside, smelling faintly of beer. The space suddenly felt too small. Hey, Mom. Can I come in? I nodded. Listen, about earlier. I didn't mean to pressure you. I understand, I said softly, stirring the pot. We're just in a bad place, and you're the only one we can turn to. He sat in the single chair, hunched, hands on his knees. I stayed by the stove. I'll think about it, Randall, I repeated. Thanks, Mom. He forced a smile. By the way, how do you like it here? Are you comfortable? It's fine, I said, not wanting to sound ungrateful. Just cold in the mornings. And the water barely gets warm. Yeah, that heater's ancient. I'll see what I can do. He looked around. You know, running this place costs money too. Electricity, water. Especially if the heater's on 24/7. There it was again. The second move, the suggestion that I was already a financial burden. I can contribute, I said calmly. How much do you want for rent? He blinked. No, no, Mom. That's not what I'm saying. Just, everything's expensive.
I see, I said, and stirred the pot again.
He stood.
Well, I won't interrupt your dinner. Good night.
After he left, I finished the oatmeal, but the taste had gone. I forced myself to eat it anyway. I would not cry. Not here. The next morning, I stayed in the barn for breakfast. Tea, cookies, and a book. Bleak House, one of Harold's favorites. Around noon, Heather stopped by, dressed to the nines. Elegant dress, perfect makeup, heels clicking on the floor. Margaret, Randall and I are going to a barbecue. A friend's house.
Will you be okay alone till tonight?
Of course, I replied.
Enjoy yourselves.
Thanks. She lingered at the door. By the way, did Randall talk to you about our situation?
Yes, he did. And I'm still thinking.
She pressed her lips together. I understand. It's just, if my mother-in-law were in trouble, I wouldn't hesitate. A subtle stab to the conscience.
I'm sure you wouldn't, Heather, I said, keeping my voice even.
But 30,000 isn't small to me. Of course, she said quickly. I just thought I'd remind you. She smiled, tight-lipped. We'll be back late. Once they were gone, I went into the house. The urge to snoop felt wrong, but I needed to understand. What I found confirmed every instinct I had. A pile of unpaid bills on the kitchen table, utilities, credit cards, insurance. Substantial, yes, but not overwhelming. In a drawer, I found paperwork for Randall's car, a brand new 5 Series BMW. I whistled. It cost more than half the value of my old home. In his office, crumpled bank statements showed overdrafts, bounced checks, and frivolous spending, restaurants, clothes, a Bahama vacation just 3 months ago. This wasn't bad luck. It was entitlement, lack of restraint. Back in the barn, I sat for a long time. Should I give them the money? A part of me wanted to. He's my son. But I knew it would vanish quickly. And then they'd be back. I made my decision. That evening, Randall and Heather returned around 11, their laughter ringing through the yard. They brought guests. Music thumped through the walls, and I lay still in the dark, waiting. Monday morning, Randall left early. Heather stayed home. At 10, I knocked on the door. She opened it with a mug in hand, dark circles under her eyes. Good morning, Margaret.
Need anything?
I wanted to talk.
About the money.
Her posture changed. Of course. Come in. We sat at the kitchen table. She tried to look casual, but her eyes gleamed.
I've been thinking, I began.
I want to help. Not with 30, but with 10. Her expression flickered, disappointment, quickly masked. That's very generous, Margaret. We're grateful. I can write a check now, or transfer it. A check is perfect, she said quickly. I'll deposit it today. I filled out the check.
As I handed it to her, I felt a hollowness that had nothing to do with money.
I hope this helps with the urgent things.
It does, she said, folding it and tucking it away.
You have no idea what this means to us. But I did. I knew exactly what it meant. And I knew it wasn't over. The next day, Randall showed up with a cheap bottle of wine and a cheerful demeanor. You've been a big help, Mom, he said, pouring me a glass. We don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, I replied. You're my son. He talked endlessly, about work, plans, promises. I listened. But all I could hear was a lie wrapped in warmth. Days passed. Suddenly Heather brought me tea in the morning. Randall fixed the faucet. A better heater was installed. They buzzed around me like attentive bees. But the sting was coming. And it did. A week later, another dinner invitation. Roast beef. My favorite, though I never mentioned it. After dessert, Randall cleared his throat. There's something we need to talk about. Yes, I asked, setting my spoon down.
Your help was invaluable, he began.
We paid the most urgent debts. But it wasn't enough. Go on, I said. He hesitated, then, we're still behind on the mortgage. The bank might repossess the house. How much this time? He looked away. 25,000. I was quiet. This was a cliff. One step, and I'd fall into the bottomless pit. 25 today. 50 tomorrow. My life, drained. I need to think about it, I said flatly. I said at last, slowly, each syllable heavy on my tongue. Of course, Mother, Randall nodded, but quickly added, just not for too long, if possible. We don't have much time. Heather jumped in, her voice soft but urgent. Margaret, we realize we're asking a lot, but this is our home. We don't want to end up on the street. I didn't respond. A tight silence stretched across the space. The idea of them losing their house twisted something in me, but what troubled me more, what clung to my thoughts like a bitter taste, was their attitude. Toward money. Toward me. As if I were less a person and more a vault to be cracked open. Around midnight, I heard voices drifting in from the side of the house. The window in the barn was cracked, letting in a warm spring breeze, and with it, words they never meant for me to hear. Randall and Heather were on the back porch, sipping from glasses, silhouettes under the dim outdoor lights. They couldn't see me in the barn's darkness, and I became an accidental witness. Do you think she'll give more? Heather asked, her voice tinged with doubt. She should, Randall said confidently. She's my mother. Besides, where would she go? I don't know, Heather replied. She didn't seem too convinced. It's a tactic, Randall said with a grin in his voice. She wants us to ask. Old people like to feel needed. The words struck like a slap. Old people. Where can she go? I wasn't a mother. I was an ATM with a gray bun and a fading pension. What if she says no? Heather asked. Then I'll have to push harder, Randall said, taking another sip. Hint that if she doesn't help, she might need to find another place to live. You think that'll work? I'm sure it will. She's not going anywhere. She's got no one but us. And besides, I'm the only heir. Sooner or later, all that money's gonna be ours anyway. Heather laughed. Hopefully sooner rather than later. She doesn't look so great. I bet the old woman won't last long in that barn, will she? They laughed together then, a sharp, cruel sound that sliced through the night and into me. So that's how they saw me. Squeeze out every dollar, then wait for me to die. Randall's voice came again, smooth and chilling. We'll have to get her to sign power of attorney, he said. To have access to all her accounts. For her own good, of course. For her own good, Heather echoed, giggling. They kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. I closed the window slowly and sat on the bed, a silent fury curling inside me. It had all become clear. I wasn't their mother. Not even a person. Just a resource to be drained. They didn't love me. They didn't respect me. They laughed behind my back, and in private, they wished for my death. Well, I thought coldly, if they want to play a game, let them. But it'll be by my rules. 3 weeks passed since that night. 3 long weeks in which I played my part like a seasoned actress. I smiled politely when Heather brought me fresh towels. Nodded when Randall fussed over whether I was warm enough in the barn.
I let them believe I was the gullible old woman, flattered by their sudden attention.
I let them believe they were winning. In those 3 weeks, after much coaxing and dramatic appeals, I gave them another $15,000. I made them work for it. I made them persuade me. I watched their eyes light up when they saw the check, watched their giddy restraint as they tried to mask their triumph. But I also noticed the designer heels on Heather and the new watch gleaming on Randall's wrist, gifts that didn't quite fit the story of desperation they'd been feeding me. Their hunger was growing. Yesterday, Randall mentioned, almost casually, that they needed another $35,000. One last payment, Mom, and we'll be back on our feet. I told him I'd think about it, nodded along, but inside I could feel the storm gathering. Do they really think I'm this stupid? This morning, Heather knocked on the barn door earlier than usual. She was dressed in a smart navy suit, makeup perfect, heels tapping the porch like a metronome. Apparently, she had a meeting. "Good morning, Margaret," she smiled. "Randall and I wanted to invite you to dinner tonight. Something special." "Thank you, Heather," I replied. "I'd love to come." "Great. 7 o'clock. Randall's cooking steaks." She turned and walked off with a sharp click of expensive heels. Something special, I thought, watching her disappear around the corner. What are they planning this time? Another request? Or something even bolder? The rest of the day passed slowly. I walked to the small park a few blocks away, sat beneath a tree, and watched children play. Over the past few days, I'd struck up small conversations with others there. Elderly couples, dog walkers, a kind woman named Doris who told me about a nearby senior center. Art classes, music, bus tours. "You should stop by," she said. "It's lovely there." I'd thought about it. I used to love painting. Before Randall. Before work and laundry and meals and exhaustion buried it all. Back at the barn, I took my time getting ready. A dark blue dress, one of the few decent ones I still had. I brushed my gray hair, applied a little lipstick.
In the mirror above the sink, I saw a woman with tired eyes, yes, but also a woman with pride, with strength, and with a spine that had not yet bent to those who wished her to break.
At exactly 7 o'clock, I knocked on their door. Randall opened it, grinning in an apron. "Mom, come in. Steaks are almost ready." The house smelled of grilled meat and something floral and expensive. Heather was already seated at the table in a sleek black dress, red wine in hand. "Margaret, you look lovely," she said. Her lips curled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Thank you, Heather. You look lovely too." I sat, and Randall poured me a generous glass of wine. The label looked costly, definitely not something people on the verge of foreclosure usually buy. I noted that mentally. We started dinner with idle chatter. The weather. Work updates. Heather's new client. They served me the best cuts, topped off my wine, fawned over me like attentive caregivers. I smiled through it, but inside I knew. I knew they were fattening the calf for slaughter. As we moved on to dessert, a store-bought cheesecake, I saw the moment Randall's expression shifted. "Mom," he began. "Heather and I have been thinking a lot about your situation." "My situation?" I lifted a brow. "You're alone," he said, voice dripping concern. "No husband. A strange city. The money from the house sale is all you have. And we're just worried that someone could take advantage of you." "Like you," I wanted to say, but I just nodded thoughtfully. Heather leaned in. "We've been thinking about your future. How to ensure peace of mind. No financial stress. Ever." Randall reached into his pocket and unfolded a sheet of paper. "Our company lawyer helped us draft something. It's a power of attorney. To manage your finances." There it was. The wolf, finally out of its sheep costume. Power of attorney? I said, eyes wide, playing the part. For your safety, Randall said quickly. At your age, it's easy to fall victim to scams, or even just bad decisions. With this, we'd help you manage everything. Help? I asked, still calm. Or control? Manage, he corrected sharply. We'd make the big decisions together. I'd seen the document out of the corner of my eye. Standard form. Full control. Note together about it. And what would you do with my money? I asked, sipping my wine. They glanced at each other. Well, first we'd consolidate the funds, Randall said, into one account. It's easier to manage that way. In my account? I asked. In a joint account, Heather answered quickly. You'd still have access. Anytime. We all knew that was a lie. If I signed that paper, I'd never see another dollar again. So you want me to hand over all control of my finances and assets to you? Not hand over, Randall said, the irritation surfacing now. Just help us help you. And how is that different from handing it over? He stiffened. Mom, you don't understand. No, I said. I let the mask slip. You don't understand. I may be old, Randall, but I'm not senile. I know exactly what this is. His face changed. The sun dissolved. The mask dropped. All that was left was a man, red with anger. What do you think we're trying to do? He hissed. Take my money, I said flatly. You've already conned me out of $25,000. Now you want everything. Heather's face turned ashen. Randall flushed. How dare you? He barked. After everything we've done? We sheltered you when you had nowhere else to go. Sheltered? I laughed coldly. In a shed. Out back. That's not shelter. That's storage. Heather jumped in, voice trembling with self-righteous rage. You should be grateful you're not in a nursing home. I looked at her evenly. How much are you charging me for this nursing home of yours? I asked ironically, because I remember your implication that I should pay to live in your barn. My voice was steady, cold. Randall slammed his fist against the table. The plates clattered and jumped. That's enough. You live on our property, Mom. Our house, our rules. And what are those rules, Randall? I countered sharply. Give you all my money? It's not like that, he said, but his eyes betrayed him. There was no hiding it anymore. Then what is it? Why do you need power of attorney? I asked, watching his composure begin to crack. For your own good, he snapped. But if you can't understand that, if you don't trust your own son, maybe you should look for another place to live. There it was. The threat I had expected. Maybe I should, I said calmly, rising from the table. Thanks for dinner. I think I'll go to my room now. I walked out, their eyes burning into my back. The night air was warm, but I was shivering. They weren't even pretending anymore. It was money or eviction, that was the ultimatum. Fine. I had an answer, but they wouldn't hear it until tomorrow. The next morning, I waited until Randall left for work and Heather headed to the gym. Then I called for a cab. My first stop was the bank, where I retrieved my mother's jewelry from the safety deposit box and closed the account. From there, I visited a lawyer. With his help, I revised my will. Randall was no longer my heir. In his place were two charities, one supporting the elderly, the other helping survivors of domestic abuse. My last visit was to Sunset Gardens, an independent living complex for seniors. The manager showed me a sunlit studio apartment with its own balcony and kitchenette. It felt warm, human, real. I signed the lease and paid the deposit and first month's rent. A real home, I thought, not a shed in someone's backyard. When I returned to the barn, I began to pack. It didn't take long. 2 suitcases and a duffel bag held everything I owned. I folded my clothes carefully, placed a few photographs and books in the side pocket, and tucked the velvet pouch of jewelry into my purse. I was just zipping up the final suitcase when the barn door opened. Randall and Heather stood there, expressions twisted in disbelief and fury. "What's going on?" Randall demanded, eyeing the luggage. "Are you going somewhere?" I stood tall, met his gaze without blinking. "Yes, Randall. I'm moving." "Where?" Heather asked quickly. "You don't have another place to live." "I do now," I replied coolly. "I've rented an apartment at Sunset Gardens." Randall went pale. "That expensive retirement complex? Where did you get the money?" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to my purse, where the velvet edge of the jewelry pouch was visible. He lunged forward and snatched it out before I could react. "Give it back." I reached for the pouch, but he stepped back and emptied it into his palm. Pearl necklace, gold earrings, an amethyst brooch. All my mother's heirlooms glittered in his hand. "Where did this come from?" he hissed. "You said you had no valuables besides the house money." "I don't have to account for my possessions to you," I said firmly. "Now give me my things back." He laughed, but it was ugly. "After you lied to us? After you hid your riches while we're barely scraping by?" "Riches?" I snorted. "That jewelry might fetch a few thousand, maybe. And it belonged to my mother." "It's a family heirloom," Randall exclaimed. "It should stay in the family." "Family," I repeated, bitterness seeping into my voice. "Where was family when you put me in the barn? When you and your wife sat on the porch plotting to squeeze every dollar out of me? When you said the old woman wouldn't last long?" Randall's face turned white. "Were you eavesdropping?" "There's no need to eavesdrop when you're yelling across the yard after 3 glasses of wine," I shot back. Heather stormed forward, her face contorted. "You can't just leave, Margaret. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go." "And I'm grateful for that," I replied evenly. "So grateful I gave you $25,000 for 3 weeks in a barn." "I thought that was more than generous." Randall's fists clenched, still holding my jewelry. "You changed your will, didn't you? You disinherited me." I didn't reply, but my silence said it all. "How could you do that?" he screamed, throwing the jewelry on the floor in rage. "I'm your son. Your only child." "The son who only saw his mother as a bank account," I answered. "The son who waited for her to die so he could inherit." "That's not true," Heather yelled. "We took care of you." "You took care of my money," I corrected, bending to gather my jewelry. "That's all you cared about." Randall grabbed my arm, his fingers pressing into my skin. "You can't just walk away. Not after everything we've done." I pulled my arm free and looked him square in the eye. "I can, Randall. And I will. A cab's coming tomorrow morning. You won't see me again." He was shouting now, frantic. "How could you do that? Disinherit me? Hide the jewelry? Leave without warning?" I looked at him with an expression that said everything he needed to know. And still, it wasn't enough. Not for him. That night, I barely slept. Every sound behind the barn door made my nerves jump. Not because I feared Randall. He wasn't dangerous. But I wouldn't have put it past them to try to sabotage my escape, hide my suitcase, steal my documents, anything to regain control. But the night passed without incident. By 5 a.m., I was already up. The bed was made. Old habits die hard. I checked and double-checked my documents. Passport, bank cards, insurance, new lease. Everything was in order. At 7:30, I heard movement in the house. Doors slammed. The shower ran. They were awake. I sat on the bed and waited, watching the clock tick away the last few minutes of my life in this house that was never a home. At exactly 8 o'clock, the cab arrived. I heard the engine, then footsteps approaching the house. The doorbell rang. I peered out the window. Randall, buttoning his shirt, opened the door. Heather hovered in the kitchen, her silhouette stiff in the glass. I grabbed my bags, took one final look at the barn, and stepped into the yard. The morning air was crisp and clean. Birds chirped cheerfully, as if heralding my new beginning.
"Mom," Randall said, stunned.
"Are you really leaving?"
"Yes, Randall," I said without hesitation. "The cab is waiting."
Heather emerged from the house, straightening her hair, already dressed for work in a navy suit and heels. When she saw the luggage loaded into the car, she stopped, frozen. "Margaret, you can't just leave," she said, stunned. "We need to talk."
"About yesterday."
"I was very clear about yesterday," I said, moving toward the gate. Randall stepped in front of me, blocking the path. "Mom, please. Let's talk. I was wrong. I said too much. We can sit down, discuss everything. Calmly." "The time for calm discussions is over," I told him. "Please let me go."
"No," he said firmly, crossing his arms.
"Not until you tell me what you did. Where did you transfer the money?"
"What did you say to the lawyer?"
I sighed. "Fine. Since you insist." I closed the Wells Fargo account. I moved the money to another bank. I changed my will. My heirs are now 2 charities. I took my jewelry from the deposit box. I rented an apartment at Sunset Gardens. Randall's face drained of color. You can't disinherit me. I'm your son. Your only child." "I can, Randall. And I did." "But why?" His voice cracked. "What did I do?" I stared at him, amazed at the question. "You put me in a shed. You manipulated me. You plotted with your wife to get my money. You hoped I'd die soon. And you're still asking what you did." Heather rushed toward us. "Margaret, you've misunderstood. We just wanted to help you manage things. At your age." "Spare me the hypocritical concern," I cut her off. "You didn't see a mother.
You saw a lifeline to bail you out."
"That's not true," Randall said. "I care about you." I laughed, sharp and joyless. "Is that what caring looks like to you?" I turned to both of them. For years, I blamed myself. I thought I was too strict, demanded too much. But I finally see, I wasn't the problem. You are. Your selfishness, your entitlement, your cruelty. Randall opened his mouth, but no words came. Heather tried again, more desperate this time. "We'll give you the guest room. Or our bedroom.
Anything you want."
I looked at her, almost pitying. "You think this is about comfort? A mattress? It's about how you treated me. From the start." Randall stepped forward. "Please, Mom. Come back. We'll change. We'll prove how much we love you." There was fear in his voice now. Not loss of love, loss of wealth. I saw it clear as day.
"No, Randall," I said softly.
"It's too late. I've already made my decision." Then I walked past him, opened the gate, and stepped into my new life. I tried to go around him, but he stepped in front of me again, blocking my path. His voice rose, the edge of anger cutting through. "You can't just walk away," he snapped. "I won't let you." My voice turned sharp and cold. "If you don't let me go now, Randall, I'll call the police. Do you really want it to come to that?" It worked. He stepped back, face twisted in a grimace of impotent rage.
"You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice bitter.
"When you're alone in that expensive apartment, with no family, no support."
I looked him in the eye.
"I'd rather be alone than stay with a family like this," I said evenly, and turned toward the gate. The cab driver, an older man with a kind face and a neat gray mustache, was already waiting beside the car. He gave me a nod, took my suitcase, and opened the door. I had one foot in when Heather came running across the yard, breathless. "Wait!" she shouted. "Margaret! You can't do this to us. We were counting on your money. We have debts, loans." So there it was. The truth at last. Stripped of civility. No more false smiles. "My money is my money, Heather," I said firmly. "Not yours. Not Randall's. Mine. And I will use it as I see fit." "But we're family," she cried. "Family is supposed to help each other." "Family," I said, "is about giving and receiving help. Have you ever considered that I'm a person too? That I have feelings? That I have needs of my own? No. To you, I was just a source of money. And now that the money's gone, you're panicking."
Randall approached again, his voice rising with frustration.
"You're just getting back at me, aren't you? For not being the perfect son. For not calling.
For not visiting on holidays."
I shook my head. "This isn't revenge, Randall. I'm just finally living for myself. I'm protecting what's mine." "You're selfish," he spat. "You've always been selfish. All you ever cared about was yourself." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. "That's rich, coming from you. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to a good school. I denied myself everything so you could have the best. I sacrificed everything. And this is the thanks I get." "You were a terrible mother," he shouted, voice cracking now. "Always criticizing me. Always demanding more. You were never satisfied."
"I wanted you to be a good man," I said quietly.
"God knows I tried. But maybe I failed." That struck something in him. His face lost color. He took a small step back, stammering. You have no right to judge me. You don't know what I've been through." "Do you?" I asked. "Have you ever once thought about what I've been through? About how it feels to be widowed after 40 years of marriage? To sell a home full of memories? To move in with a son who sticks me in a barn and sees me as nothing but a purse on legs?" Something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe, but it vanished quickly, replaced by cold resolve. "If you leave now," he said, voice flat, "you may never come back. Never. I'll cut you out of my life." I stared at him, unflinching. "You cut me out of your life a long time ago, Randall. You just didn't have the decency to tell me." I got into the cab and shut the door. As the car pulled away, I looked back one last time. Randall and Heather stood in the driveway like statues, staring after me, faces frozen in disbelief, dreams of easy money dissolving in the morning sun. "Family problems?" the driver asked gently. "Yes," I replied, my voice quiet. "Happens," he said.
"Where to, ma'am?"
"Sunset Gardens, please." We drove through the awakening streets of Arlington. The city was shaking off the night. People hurried to work, mothers ushered children into cars, older folks walked dogs through sleepy neighborhoods. It was ordinary life, unfolding as it always had.
And somewhere in it now was me, not an unwanted guest, not a burden in the barn, not an old woman quietly dissolving into someone else's shadow, but a person.
Independent. Real. Randall's furious face floated into my mind again. Heather's desperate voice echoed. I remembered their panic at the idea of losing access to my money. Yes, it hurt. It was disappointing. But there was something freeing about it, too. No more lies. No more pretending. The truth had burned through everything, and I had survived it.
"We're almost there, ma'am," the driver said as we turned onto a quiet, tree-lined street.
Sunset Gardens looked even more beautiful in the soft morning light. Neat buildings nestled among lush greenery. Paved walkways wound through the grounds. A few residents sat on benches or strolled slowly under the trees. Peace lived here. Dignity lived here. Everything my son's home lacked. At the main entrance, Gloria, the complex manager, was waiting.
"Mrs. Brooks," she said with a warm smile.
"You're early. Your apartment is ready. Do you need help with your bags?" "Thank you, Gloria," I said. "But I can manage. I don't have much." "Then let me walk you up. Welcome to Sunset Gardens." We rode the elevator to the second floor. She opened the door to my new apartment, and I stepped inside. It was small, yes, but warm. Clean. Bright. The living room had a cozy kitchenette. The bedroom held a wide, soft bed. The bathroom had handrails for safety. And the balcony overlooked a park where children from the nearby school were already playing. "I hope you like it here," Gloria said kindly. "If you need anything, call any time. And at 3 o'clock, we're having a tea party in the common room. Great way to meet your neighbors." Left alone, I sat on the couch and exhaled. A flood of emotions swept through me. Relief, sorrow, anxiety. I had done it. I had cut off the toxic ties. I had protected what was mine. I had found a new place to live. But now what? What came next? I began unpacking, sorting my clothes, arranging the few photos I brought, hanging up my jacket. Each small action helped reclaim a little piece of control. When I placed Harold's photo, my late husband, on the nightstand, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. Paradoxically, I had just left behind my only close family, yet I felt free. Around noon, my phone rang. Randall's number. I hesitated, then answered.
"Mom," he said, voice strained.
"I want to apologize for this morning. I was upset.
I said things I shouldn't have."
"Thank you for apologizing," I replied dryly.
"Is that all?" "No, not all," he paused.
"I want you to know, the door to our home is always open to you. If you don't like Sunset Gardens or if you run out of money." Ah, there it was. Not love. Not regret. Just hope for a second chance at my bank account. "Thank you, Randall," I said firmly. "But I've made my decision. I like it here.
And I don't plan on moving."
"But, Mom, please." His voice shifted to pleading. "We're in a really bad place. The bank might take the house.
Heather could lose her job."
"Randall," I interrupted. "I gave you $25,000 in 3 weeks. Where did it go? On watches?
"On wine."
His silence was damning. "That's what I thought," I said softly. "I can't fix your problems. You need to learn to live within your means. Maybe sell the house. Cut back. Budget." His voice sharpened. "So that's all? Financial advice? From someone who spent her life counting pennies? You don't understand how modern life works." "Maybe not," I said. "But I know this. More debt doesn't solve old debt. And using your mother as a lifeline is no kind of plan." "You're a heartless old woman," he spat. Strangely, it didn't sting. Not anymore.
"No, Randall," I said quietly.
"You're the one who doesn't care about your mother." And I hung up. No shouting. No crying. Just peace. I turned off the phone and placed it in the drawer. I needed silence now. Not more conversation, not more guilt. Just time. Time to rest. To begin again. I stepped out onto the balcony. The park below was alive with laughter and birdsong. Children played catch, older couples strolled hand in hand. It was quiet, steady, good. And this was my life now. Suddenly, I felt energized. I wanted to explore, to meet people, to live. I went back in, unpacked the last of my bags, took a long shower, slipped into a fresh dress, and headed downstairs. In the lobby, an elderly woman greeted me with a warm smile. "Are you new here?" she asked. "I've lived here 5 years. I can show you around." "I'd love that," I said. "My name's Margaret Brooks." "Nice to meet you, Margaret. I'm Eleanor. Come on, let me show you where the library is. Do you like to read?" And just like that, we were walking down the corridors of Sunset Gardens, chatting like old friends. Eleanor told me about the activities, the book club, the gardening group. I listened and smiled, thinking how strange life was. Sometimes you have to lose a family to find a home. That evening, as I sat in my little apartment with a cup of tea, the silence felt different. Not empty, but peaceful. That night, I sat alone with my thoughts, the gentle hum of crickets drifting through the open balcony doors. I reflected on everything, the tangled mess of my son's betrayal, the courage it took to walk away, and the strange sense of calm that followed. Yes, it had been painful. Yes, there were moments when fear crept in. But regret? No.
I looked at Harold's photo beside me, his kind eyes frozen in time, watching over me as if he knew.
You see, Harold?
I did it after all, I whispered softly.
I found the strength to start a new life.
I only wish you were here. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a glint of approval in his eyes, a trick of light, perhaps, or something more.
But in that moment, peace settled over me like a warm blanket. I finally believed that even at 75, life still had new chapters waiting to be written. A month passed quickly. Sunset Gardens had become my sanctuary. The small second-floor apartment, which once felt unfamiliar, now wrapped around me like a well-worn sweater. I'd added my own touches, bright curtains, houseplants, a few old photo frames, and the space blossomed with life. Morning coffee on the balcony became a ritual. Evenings were for borrowed books and classic films. But what I cherished most was that I was no longer alone. I wasn't an appendage to someone else's life. I was Margaret Brooks again. Eleanor, the spirited woman who first welcomed me, had become my closest friend. At 78, with a wry sense of humor and a heart full of stories, she understood. She'd refused her daughter's invitations to move in, not out of defiance, but dignity. "I didn't want to be the grandmother in the rocking chair," she once told me. "I wanted to be myself." And that was it, really.
Here, among these silver-haired strangers, I was seen, not as a burden, not as someone who had outlived her usefulness, but as a person.
One Wednesday afternoon, I noticed a flyer pinned to the bulletin board. Beginner's drawing class at the nearby community center, every Saturday. I stared at it for a long time. It had been years, decades, since I'd held a paintbrush. Before marriage, before Randall, before life slowly drained the time and the want from me, I used to paint. Still lives, soft landscapes in watercolor. I remembered that version of myself. Vivid. Alive. Brave.
Thinking about it?
Eleanor's voice broke my trance. "Michael Foster runs it. He's very kind, doesn't judge us old folks. You should join." I hesitated. "I'm not sure I remember how." She grinned. "I started yoga at 70. It's never too late, Margaret. Especially not for something that once made you happy." Her words settled inside me. What was I afraid of? A blank canvas? After everything I'd been through, fear of a little paper felt absurd. That Saturday, I walked into the community center like a child on her first day of school. 8 students were there, all around my age except for one younger woman who said painting helped her with depression.
Michael Foster was a gentle man in his 50s with kind eyes and the patience of a saint.
He didn't critique, he encouraged. There are no mistakes in art, he said, only steps toward understanding yourself. My first painting, a still life of apples, was awful. Wobbly lines, faded color, but he smiled and said, "You've got a great eye for composition. And you're not afraid of color. That's rare." I walked home lighter than I had in years. For the first time in so long, I felt not just alive, but awake. That evening, I noticed several missed calls on my phone. 5 from Randall. A heavy sigh escaped my lips. A part of me, the maternal part that refused to die, wondered if something was wrong. I called back. He answered instantly. "Mom." "Thank God. I thought something happened to you."
"I'm fine, Randall," I said with quiet firmness.
"Just busy." He laughed bitterly. "Busy? What could you be busy with in a retirement home?" "It's not a home, it's an independent living community. And yes, I'm busy. I have a life now." He didn't ask more. Just launched straight into it. Some new project. Another miracle investment. This time only $50,000, with promises to triple it in 6 months. The same old lines, rehearsed like a script. "Randall, I've told you before, I will not finance your schemes," I said. "We've got a business plan," he protested. "Marketing strategy, projections. Then why can't you get a bank loan?" Silence. And there it was. "No, Randall. Not $50,000. Not $5,000, not even $5. I'm done." His voice shifted. Desperate. "If we don't get this going now, we'll lose everything."
Heather had to sell her car.
"I'm sorry for your troubles," I said sincerely. "But your solutions can't come from my retirement. Grow up, Randall. Find a job. Cut back. Move to something affordable." "You don't understand," he snapped. "Modern life is expensive. And yet somehow, millions of people make it work without draining their elderly parents," I replied. His voice turned venomous. "You're heartless. You don't care if your own son ends up homeless." But I did care. I just wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. "No, Randall. You don't care about your mother.
And this conversation is over."
I hung up. And then, without hesitation, I blocked his number. That night, I slept soundly. The guilt had lifted like a storm cloud finally passing. The next morning, I told Eleanor. She smiled knowingly. "It's the only way to break free, Margaret. Otherwise, the cycle never ends." She was right. I was done living in fear of a ringing phone. Weeks turned to months. My world flourished. Art classes, book clubs, music recitals. Life bloomed around me. My paintings, once clumsy, now had confidence. Michael praised my eye for landscapes. "You see the quiet magic in ordinary things," he said. "That's art." I even helped start a small poetry group. One afternoon, returning from a walk, I saw him, Randall, standing by the gates of Sunset Gardens. Gaunt, pale, nervous. My heart clenched, but I didn't turn away. He approached. "You blocked my number," he said. I had no choice. I met his eyes. I did. I made that choice for my own peace. He looked hurt, but I saw no remorse, only desperation. "Mom, I know I've been a terrible son, but we lost everything. The house. My job."
Heather left. "And you've come to ask for money," I said plainly.
He didn't deny it. "Just $10,000.
Just enough to get back on our feet."
I looked at him, really looked. A man shaped by entitlement, never consequence. A boy who never grew up.
No, Randall, I said gently.
Not this time. You need to learn how to stand without leaning on others.
Without leaning on me.
His face twisted. You've always been cold, calculating, never loved me. I felt the sadness settle in, but not shame. I loved you more than you'll ever know. But love doesn't mean paying your debts. Sometimes love is saying no. His voice rose, sharp and angry. You'll die alone, he shouted. I nodded, serene. Maybe, but I'll die free.
And that's enough for me.
I walked away as he shouted behind me, not looking back. I didn't need to. The door was closed. 3 more months passed. Sunset Gardens became my world. I painted, I laughed, I shared meals with friends. My art was displayed in the lobby. I even gave a small speech at our exhibit opening. I didn't hear from Randall. I wondered sometimes, but the ache had dulled. One day, I received a postcard from Seattle. His handwriting. Mom, I moved to Seattle. Got a job in construction. Heather and I split. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I'm alive and trying. I held the card for a long time. Relief washed over me. Not joy, not reconciliation. Just the quiet knowledge that he might, at last, be learning to stand. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Just, there was nothing left to say. Someday, perhaps. But not now. Now was mine. On my 76th birthday, I hosted a small dinner for my friends at Sunset Gardens. Eleanor helped with the cooking. Arthur brought his violin. We laughed, remembered, toasted to life. That night, I stepped onto my balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The stars glittered above, and the jasmine scent from the neighbor's garden drifted through the air. I thought about the barn, about the money, about the fear I had shed, like an old skin. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. I raised my glass to the night sky. To freedom, I whispered. To a life that still unfolds, no matter what. And in that moment, just me, the stars, and the quiet rhythm of a life reclaimed, I knew, it's never too late to start living for yourself. Especially at 75.